Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Ruach HaKodesh. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to be going into Ezekiel, the 4th chapter. And pretty much the 3rd chapter was going into, once again, the Lord coming to Ezekiel and letting him know what he requires of Ezekiel to do, right? Because we know that at this point Ezekiel is a captive in Babylon, and at this point Jerusalem is, you can think of it like how you would think of a nation being a province to another nation, meaning at this point in time Jerusalem is subject to the Babylonians, right? The Neo-Babylonian Empire. And Nebuchadnezzar has set up a puppet king, a puppet ruler, being Zedekiah, over there in Jerusalem. Okay, and so basically they have to pay tribute, to Babylon and so on and so forth. And at the same time, you still have Daniel, the 3 holy children, and Ezekiel. They're all in here along with some captives of the Israelites here in Babylon. Okay, so this is what the Lord is now telling Ezekiel. And keep in mind that, and this was not unique to Ezekiel, but the Lord oftentimes had the prophets of old go and do certain things, perform certain actions that would symbolize, something that would happen in the future, okay, or that would symbolize the relationship between the Lord and the nation of Israel, or something along those lines. And an example of that is in Ezekiel, the 4th chapter. So it says, siege of Jerusalem predicted. This is Ezekiel 4:1. Thou also, son of man, take thee a tile and lay it before thee, and portray upon it the city, even Jerusalem. So a tile basically being like a clay tablet. and the Lord told Ezekiel to get one of those and to portray, so like to cut out an image of the city of Jerusalem inside of that tile. And that's the portrayal part. Today it's like if you had a piece of paper and you drew like a diagram or like some landscape of Jerusalem. Verse 2, and lay siege against it, and build a fort against it, and cast a mount against it, set the camp also against it, and set battering rams against it round about. So Ezekiel is basically simulating a siege, but he's using like a clay tablet and maybe some other instruments that he would build to basically make this simulation as though this is a siege. And what he is doing here is representing what was actually going to happen on a large scale to the actual physical Jerusalem. Okay, now in the siege, you would build the besiegers or the attackers, they would build a fort or a wall around, because a siege typically did not last like 1 or 2 days. Sieges last a long time, years even. And both the attackers and those that were being attacked, it would put them both in a difficult situation. But sometimes the attackers would try to offer some generous terms, because the siege was expensive, right? It was expensive. You needed provisions. If you were the one attacking, you needed provisions for your soldiers in case they got sick. If you had to go through winter, the materials that you would need to build these walls and forts and so on and so forth. So it was expensive, especially if the city that you were besieging was like a defense city and they already had food and resources in there. Sometimes they could pile up in there and hold up for a good period of time. So the Lord is telling Ezekiel here to build this wall around it, and that's what they would do to prevent anybody from going out or coming in, right? And cast a mount against it, and set the camp also against it. So simulate like you have an army that is coming to besiege this place, and set battering rams against it round about, because they would use those battering rams to try and break down the walls. and they would set up these siege towers that they would use to try and scale the walls. Verse 3, moreover, take thou unto thee an iron pan, and set it for a wall of iron between thee and the city. So you've built this little miniature landscape of Jerusalem, and like this, you've simulated a siege-like situation. Now you're gonna put an iron pan between you and that thing you've built, and set thy face against it. So now you're gonna face it, and it shall be besieged, and thou shalt lay siege against it. This shall be a sign to the house of Israel. So this was symbolic. This was to represent what was actually going to happen physically to Jerusalem, because not too long after this, Jerusalem actually the Babylonians laid siege to Jerusalem, which they ended up, after some time, over a year or so, they ended up prevailing and breaking down the walls and destroying the temple and everything. Verse 4, lie thou also upon thy left side, and lay the iniquity of the house of Israel upon it, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon it, thou shalt bear their iniquity. So basically, the Lord told Ezekiel, now, once again, you're going to lie on your left side, and this is going to symbolize the, as it's saying in here, he's going to lie on his left side. Now, it mentions the house of Israel, and as you go on down, it also mentions the house of Judah. So it's the house of Israel here is representing the northern kingdom, and the house of Judah is representing the southern kingdom. Okay, now when you actually look it up, even when you're reading about the building of the tabernacle, if you read it carefully, you'll notice that the cardinality, the directions, north, west, south, and east, are sort of flipped. So as we're today, what we look at as north, when you read it, it sounds west, and what we look at as east is actually referred to as north. So there's a precept, I think is in Ezekiel 16. Let's see, Ezekiel, 156. Where did I get that? All right, it's come down here, and let's see something real quick. All right, I'm trying to see if I can find it. I know there's a precept that basically in here it refers to the directions in which the land, like the Samarias, in comparison to, coming in the direction of Judah. Okay, so it basically refers to Samaria sort of as to the left side, as where Judah is more down to the right side. And in order to see it that way, you would have to be standing. Maybe if you're standing in Jerusalem, then you would be facing what we would call east. Let me actually pull up a map of ancient Near East, and then let's look up something like this, and then let's do a little something like that. Perfect. Zoom in a little bit. Cool. So basically, this, based on how you're standing in here, this would be your north, this would be your south, that would be your west, and this would be your east. Okay, so if you're standing here, this would be on your left hand side, and down here would be on your right hand side. Okay, that's basically the point that I'm making here. Nevertheless, what the Lord is asking Ezekiel here to do is, he's saying, lay down on your left side, and you're going to lay down here for a period of time. Okay, and you laying down on your left side is gonna be you bearing the iniquity of the northern kingdom. Obviously not in a literal sense, like the Lord is not saying I'm gonna punish you for what the northern kingdom has done, but I'm having you lay down on your left side as a representation. Okay, so you're gonna lay down on your left side. Verse 5, for I have lain upon thee the years of their iniquity, according to the number of the days, 390 days. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. So you're basically going to bear that 390 days, which what the Lord is saying here is the 390 days really represent 390 years. But he's saying, I have laid upon thee the years of the iniquity. And as we keep on reading, it'll tell you the Lord basically said, I have converted it. So each day that you lay down represents a year. So you laying on your left side for 390 days would represent 390 years worth of iniquity that these people have been committing. Now, when you read this, okay, on a practical sense, it doesn't explicitly say it, but on a practical sense, you'd have to reason that this wasn't something that Ezekiel would do 24/7. Okay, it wouldn't make sense for Ezekiel to lay down on his left side for 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week for 390 years consecutively. This would have to be something, he would probably do like every day, maybe at a certain time, at a certain place or something along those lines. Because remember that he has to eat. What happens when he has to use the bathroom, right? What happens when you got to think on a practical level? Because the Lord also tells him, as we keep on reading, that now you're going to take this amount of resources with you, and every day you're going to make this amount. You're going to make this food, and you're going to eat. You're going to eat this amount every day, and you're going to drink this amount of water every day. How are you going to do that? How are you going to prepare the food if you have to lay on your left side 24/7, 24 hours a day? So practically, that doesn't really make sense, right? So when you read this, you'd have to reason that, okay, he'd have to do this. Likely he'd have to do this daily, but it doesn't mean that he'd have to do this consecutive, like 24 hours. He'd just be laying on his left side like that. Okay, but keep on reading verse 5 again. For I have laid upon thee the years of their iniquity. This is dealing with the northern kingdom, according to the number of the days. See, the years of their iniquity according to the number of the days. So 390 days, which would represent 390 years. So shalt thou bear the iniquity of the house of Israel. And when thou hast accomplished them, lie again on thy right side, and thou shalt bear the iniquity of the house of Judah 40 days. I have appointed thee each day for a year. So 40 days would represent 40 years, each day being a year. So you're going to lay on your left side for 390 days, and on the right side for 40 days. Verse 7, therefore thou shalt set thy face toward the siege of Jerusalem, and thine arm shall be uncovered, and thou shalt prophesy against it. So when you're laying down, you're going to make sure that you're facing this siege that you've built, that you've designed over here. Okay? And you're going to prophesy against it. And behold, I will lay bands upon thee, and thou shalt not turn thee from one side to another, till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. Meaning, when there are bands upon you, it's sort of like you're bound, you're tied up, you can't really move, you're restricted in your movement. So what the Lord is telling Ezekiel here is basically when you're laying on one side, you're not going to be allowed to move to switch to the other side until that time is fulfilled, right? Till thou hast ended the days of thy siege. So when you start laying on your left side, for whatever period of time you're doing that, you have to make sure that you're laying on the left side and you don't turn to the right side until that 390 days is up. Then when you lay on your right side, you're going to do that for 40 days. So for those that think it was easy being a prophet, well, there you go. And this is only the beginning. As we keep on reading, there's certain other things the Lord will ask Ezekiel to do to symbolize, okay, something else on a higher level. So his life was being used as, how do I put this? When you're in class, you're learning something, the professor has like a blackboard, right? They have a blackboard, and whenever they discuss the new concept, they go on the blackboard and then they draw, like, they write examples and they do diagrams and all that to make it clear to you. So you can think of like the life of a prophet in some cases like that. The Lord sometimes uses the prophets to represent or symbolize his relationship with Israel, or maybe something he's about to do. All right. So verse 9. Take thou also unto thee wheat and barley and beans and lentils and millet and fitches, and put them in one vessel, and make thee bread thereof, according to the number of the days that thou shalt lie upon thy side. 390 days shalt thou eat thereof. So basically, you're going to gather all these ingredients, you're going to put them in a vessel, and then you're going to make food for yourself, okay, for the duration of the time that you're going to be laying on your side. And thy meat which thou shalt eat shall be by weight, 20 shekels a day. From time to time shalt thou eat it. So the Lord gave him a set portion. Like today, it's kind of like saying you're only allowed to eat 20 pounds of worth of food, like in today. So everything you eat must add up to that amount. And you know, obviously you ration up your food, and then from time to time you're going to eat it. You know, maybe you eat some in the morning, maybe some in the afternoon, maybe some in the evening. But the point here was that when you have to eat on a ration basis, that means that food is scarce. Okay, so the Lord is having Ezekiel do this, but it's to represent, so far everything we've seen is to represent the siege that Jerusalem would be in. And remember, when you're in a siege, now your resources are constrained because nothing is coming in and nothing is going out. So what you have inside is what you're going to use, which means that things are going to be rationed. You're not going to get to eat at will. Oh, I'm hungry, I want to go eat this. I'm hungry, I want to eat that. I want some of this, I want some of that. You're not going to have that luxury. Verse 11. Thou shalt drink also water by measure, the 6th part of an hin. From time to time shalt thou drink. So once again, the amount of water that you drink every day is going to be rationed. You're only allowed this amount each day. Now the 6th part of an hin, it's kind of like today. These are not exact measurements. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio. I'm just giving an example. It's kind of like today if somebody told you like 1/4 cup of water, or you know, whatever. So an hin is a measurement. And when you actually look it up in the blue letter, I think it comes up, they say it's about like 5 quarts or so. So maybe somewhere around like a little over a gallon, give or take. But the emphasis here is that the Lord is saying the food you eat a day and the water you drink a day is going to be rationed. You're going to be constrained to a certain amount that you have every day. Verse 12. And thou shalt eat it as barley cakes, and thou shalt bake it with dung that cometh out of man in their sight. In whose sight? In the sight of the captives, the Israelites that he was there with. So now, clarity, in verse 12, this doesn't mean that Ezekiel was eating shit cakes. to put it plainly. The barley cakes that he's gonna bake it with dung. When the Lord was saying you're gonna bake it with dung that cometh out of man, was saying that in the ancient world, when you bake, or when they made these cakes and so on and so forth, bread and cake, the fuel, okay, that they would use, if you didn't have like wood or sticks, they would use manure or dung as fuel for the fire, that they would then use to bake whatever it is that they were gonna, bread or cake or whatever. Okay, now when you actually look up, it'll tell you that. If you go into the dictionaries, you do some research on it. One of the ones I usually go to is Easton's Bible Dictionary, and if you look up the word, I think they should have the word dung. So here it tells you, it says here used as manure, and so on and so forth. But really the second definition is what we want to look at. Used as fuel, a substitute for firewood, which was with difficulty procured in Syria, Arabia, and Egypt, where cows and camels' dung is used to the present day for this purpose. So you could use dung as fuel for fire. And then that's what you would use to bake and make your food. So he wasn't actually going to take dung and mix it with his dough and then eat that. That's wild. Verse 13. So the Lord is saying, you're going to use dung, human shit, human feces. And you're going to do this in the sight of everybody. So the elders, the people, all of that. And remember, Ezekiel was a priest. Verse 13. And the Lord said, even thus shall the children of Israel eat their defiled bread among the Gentiles, whither I will drive them. So once again, what he is saying here is, what the Lord is saying here is, I'm having you do this, and it's going to symbolize how Israel is going to have to eat their food, how they're going to have to prepare their food in the captivity that they're going to be in. Because remember that you had remnants that were in Jerusalem, right? You had the ones here in Babylon were taken captive, but you still had a bulk of Israelites in Jerusalem. They were going to undergo the siege, and once the Babylonians overcame them, then the bulk of them would be brought captives over to Babylon as well. And you would be amongst the Gentiles, because the people that were in the kingdom of Babylon, for the most part, were Gentiles. You had Assyrians, which were the ruling class, but you also had, like, you know, Elamites and Kassites and Ammonites and all of that, or Amorites and so on and so forth. Right, and it says, whither I would drive them. Verse 14, then said I, Lord God, behold, my soul hath not been polluted from my youth up, even till now. Have I not eaten of that which dieth of itself, or is torn in pieces? Neither came there abominable flesh into my mouth. So Ezekiel was basically pleading his case, like, Lord, I mean, that's a little much, you know, to have to use the human dung. That's kind of why, you know, because what he's saying is, from when he was born and raised up, he's a priest, right? So he stayed away from anything that would make him unclean, because in the law it tells you that you're not supposed to eat anything that dies of itself, right, or is strangled, or when it says torn in pieces, that means like you may go and you see like an animal, maybe a lion killed this animal, whatever the case is. Neither any abominable flesh into his mouth. So he's saying, I've been clean. But now what you asking me, that's, you know, that's tough. So the Lord says, all right, verse 15, then he said unto me, lo, I have given thee cow's dung for man's dung, and thou shalt prepare thy bread therewith. So the Lord said, all right, cool. So instead of using man's dung, you can use, you know, you can use cow's dung. And that was a bit more common. Verse 16, moreover, he said unto me, son of man, behold, I will break the staff of bread in Jerusalem, and they shall eat bread by weight and with care, and they shall drink water by measure and with astonishment, that they may want bread and water, and be astonished one with another, and consume away for their iniquity. So the Lord is saying that, behold, this is what I'm getting ready to do. Okay, the reason I'm having you do this is because it's going to represent what I'm going to do over there physically in Jerusalem. Okay, that the breaking the staff of the bread means that the Lord was going to cause food to be scarce. Okay, and same with water, so that they were going to have to eat and drink according to rations. And then eventually the rations would get smaller and smaller, and people will start to starve, that they may want bread and water and be astonished one with another, and consume away for their iniquity. So they're basically going to suffer, and the Lord is going to punish them, is what he's saying, because of all the wickedness, mainly idolatry, that they had been committing in the land. When you read throughout the book of 1st and 2nd Kings, which basically transpires prior to this time, leading into this time, that's what Israel was doing. Right after King Solomon went in the ways of building idols and altars to these other gods because of his wives, guess what? He introduced a great deal of idolatry into Israel, and that was further carried on by Jeroboam, and so on and so forth. So a great deal of wickedness was being committed in that land, and hence the Lord was upset. This is why he sent the Assyrians after the northern kingdom, and sent the Babylonians after the southern kingdom, because he told them, if you do not obey my commandment and serve me, I'm going to take you out of that land. Okay, and things are not going to go right for you. So basically, this is Ezekiel, the 4th chapter. As we read through, this was the Lord having Ezekiel perform certain actions that would symbolize what he was actually going to do to Jerusalem. So with that, Lord willing, you are edified. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham, Yahweh Shai, Bahasham, Rakha, Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.